Well, hello everybody. Pastor Andy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. It is a beautiful Monday, and I hope that this finds you doing well today, as I always try to say. And I really do mean that. Wherever you are, whoever you are, that these words would be an encouragement to you. No, the whole reason, the whole premise behind Making It Simple is really twofold. It is to understand, simplify, if you will, Scripture. What is the message here? What does it mean? You see, because the core of my teaching is relationship. I I intentionally 100% on purpose do everything I possibly can to steer us out of the path of religion, because religion is a very confusing subject. Religion is often at the core of a lot of controversy because there's so many different facets of that, so many different combinations and directions. Jesus has nothing to do with that. If you read Scripture and understand His teaching, even if you watch programming that is biblically sound. Now, there's always going to be people who's going to find um, argument about something, whether it's a movie or a television show. However, if it is done from the right heart set, if it is done from the right attitude, it is so much easier sometimes to get a visual, get that picture when characters are being played out. For example, in the series The Chosen, and again, I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just saying I've watched it, and the picture that is being painted there is beautiful. Is there flaws? Sure there is. I'm sure there is, because there's nothing been made without flaws. There's you know taking liberties with this or that or whatever the case. But at the core of it, we see the battle between Jesus trying to bring the truth, the message to the people, and who fought him the entire way? The religious people. So here at Making It Simple, we have nothing to do with that. We teach Jesus. That's it. The message is a relationship with Him. In this latest teaching series, I should say, the Great Invitation to the Bible, we go from Old Testament to New Testament and the whole gamut in between, from Genesis to Revelation, and we will cover all of those bridges. Right now, we're in this series, and the part of our teaching right now on the invitations is come and be challenged. Now, Jesus has laid down the gauntlet, if you will. He said, if you're going to follow me, if if is where the whole thing begins, because that is where the choice is made. If, in other words, if you decide, if you make a conscious decision, an effort, if you will, to follow me, a mindset to follow me, here's how you do it. There's no ceremony, there's no recitation, there's no memorization. He said, take up your cross and follow me. We've been talking about challenge, that word, because life in and of itself is often a challenge, right? We talked about that as we ended off last week, and now we start back today. The journey sometimes is kind of repetitious. We kind of keep saying, I can't get my words out today. We kind of keep hitting our thumb with the hammer and wondering why it hurts every time. Friends, when we don't have clear direction in life, that's what we do. It does become repetitive. We don't always think about the big picture, the hereafter, if you will. Well, what if I move from point A to point B? What does that entail? What does it cost? And what will it ultimately produce? Jesus says, whosoever will come after me. Whosoever is a big word. It's not a typical word in our Western culture language, conversational speech. We don't generally use that. However, I like that word because it is very encompassing, if you will. It is a word that leaves no one out. It is a word that says there's no exclusion And at the same time, there's no exception. Whosoever, it applies to all. Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross. Well, wait a minute, Pastor. That sounds really heavy. That's because it is. This is not an easy task. No challenge is. If it were easy, everybody would do it because there would be no effort involved, right? Again, we could use 1,000 different illustrations, just like going to the gym. And I use this one a lot because that was a part of my life for a long time. Not as much as I've gotten older. I still try to maintain something, but as a young person, it was a big thing. It's a challenge to get heavier weight. It's a challenge to change your physique and all these other things. It's work, because if it wasn't, everybody would be Mr. Universe or Miss Fitness or what. No, it's work. Life is work. If there's no challenge to it, we don't learn. Our walk in faith is the same thing. If there's no challenge to it, in other words, if there's not something that tests me, if there's not something that questions my sincerity, then I don't know if I'm gaining any ground or not. I'm not getting anywhere. The cross, when it says pick up your cross, pick up your burden, carry it with, that sounds heavy. Well, that's because it is. You see, today the cross, it's not a popular subject when it comes to the reality of what Jesus did for us. However, it is a popular symbol. Necklaces and pendants and bracelets and ornaments and car tags and all. But the cross, it's about death. That's what it represents. That's what it took. But on the other side of that, the cross is also about redemption. And that's the message that Jesus is trying to get across. That is the message that is often lost because, and bear with me, I do not say this out of arrogance or pride or something that I know, but this message is often lost because of an improper understanding of what is said. We live in a time to where opinion seems to have taken over fact. Opinion seems to be the ruling thing today, and that is not exclusionary to the world. That has crept into the church as well. We see a continual pattern toward moving toward teaching what I want you to hear versus what does God say. I'm currently in a teaching series out of the book of Jonah, and one of the clear messages is found in Jonah chapter 3, as Jonah has delivered the message from God to the Ninevites, the people in the city of Nineveh. And I love the passage where it says, and I think it's somewhere around verse 4 or 5 in chapter 4 or chapter 3, it says, the people heard God. Not Jonah. He may have been the messenger, but that's not who they heard. They heard God. An improper understanding sometimes of what is being said is because one refuses to listen. I've heard people, politicians, different ones, leaders, different ones giving speeches, and people just clapping like trained seals because they didn't hear what was said. They were only listening to the auditory part. They were listening to the sound. They were listening to the jubilation of the audience and the excitement in the air and all, but they weren't listening to the words. See, we've got to get back to what is the context of the speech? What is actually being said? Jesus had started to explain to the disciples because they were asking him questions all the time. And he was explaining to them what had to happen, not what they wanted to happen, not what society wanted to happen or culture called for or religion. No. He said these are the things that must take place, had to happen. But they didn't get that because they didn't listen. Back in chapter 9 in verse 31 of this same book, Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must. Now there's one of those words. Again, you can't overlook that. Must. What does that mean? It can't be left out. It has to happen. It's kind of like pork chop must be made out of pork. I mean, there's no other exception. The chocolate has to have the cocoa bean, whatever the case. Jesus said these things must happen. And he said the Son of Man must suffer many things. So he was telling them, this is not going to be an easy road, guys. I didn't come to show you how simple this was in the sense of anybody can do it. Because later, as we talked about, they would challenge him and say, hey, can you just do what we would like for you to do? And he says, are you ready to drink the cup that I am? They weren't. None of us are either. He says, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected. So this was not going to be popular, but by who? By the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, the religious people. He said, what I'm coming to tell you, they're not going to agree with, because they are bound and blinded, not only by the adherence to the law, but by what they've added to it. Scripture clearly says, do not add to, not take away. But they had done that, and it was do as I say, and that's it. Don't question what I do. You just do as I say. They like being the ruling class. Jesus came to set us free by giving us the truth. And so he says here, I'm going to be rejected by them. Again, if you want a visual of this, just watch that program that I mentioned. Because, again, it paints a picture. It's so easy to see when it's played out before you. Again, we can criticize the liberties, but it sticks to the narrative. And I'm saying that as a pastor. I'm saying that as a proud pastor for over 20 years now. I can recognize when something is worth watching and when it's not. I don't get drawn into the drama and the glamour and I don't no, is it right? Because if it's not, I'm going to call it for what it is. But in this particular case, yeah, it's worth watching. Here, he says, I'm going to be rejected. And if you want to see that depiction, it's very, very clear. The only people that were against him, that's who they were. That's scriptural. He says, I'm going to be rejected. But then he really adds the next part. And be killed. Now, wait a minute. Here is the one. They've all said it. He's the Christ. He's the Messiah. He's our answer. He's everything. But now he's telling them, not only am I not going to be accepted by the religious crowd, the peers, if you will, but I'm also going to be killed. Well, they certainly didn't want to hear that. They rejected that message, they being the disciples, those who were following him. But then what else did he say? He says, but after 3 days, I'll rise again. They didn't hear that part. You see, the human side of that started to take over. When we hear what we don't want to hear, especially when it's the truth, what do? We shut it down because we don't want to hear that. It goes against what we want. This is exactly what happened. The last part of that sentence, he said all these awful things that were going to happen, rejected, be killed. But then he said, but after 3 days, I'll be back. They didn't hear that. Peter was the first one to jump up and say, absolutely not. Oh, no. I can't let that happen. Now, again, I'm paraphrasing. It's Pastor Andy here, but in verse 32 it says, and he spoke unto him, saying, No. And Peter, it says, began to rebuke him. Now, imagine this: Peter later, of course, would be instrumental in the foundation of the first church. But he's telling Jesus, the very one that he has looked at him in the eye and said, you are the Christ. You are the Son of God. You are it. You are the answer. He's telling him, no, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let you do that. That can't be right because it's not what I want to hear. What we have to understand, friends, in this challenge, come and be challenged, this invitation to come and be challenged is oftentimes the very message that we don't want to hear. That's the one that will change our life forever. That is why Jesus would teach the truth will set you free. It may not be what you want to hear, but it will be what you need to hear. And there's a grand difference. See, Peter, he didn't get what was being said. He didn't catch that. He didn't grasp that. He didn't understand that it was what the cross, it was what death on that cross, what it would bring. Redemption. We all need that. There was only one way for it to happen. There was only one way for this to take place. And it wasn't by anything that Peter could do or that I could do or that any of you could do. We can't earn our way in. We can't work our way in. We can't say magic words. We can't repeat what somebody else tells. Oh, just say this. No, it's got to be between you and God. And how we do that is through the person of Christ. He says that so clearly in the book of John. I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes unto the Father but by me. See, the idea, the message, if you will, of taking up the cross, we have to understand what the challenge is here. It's about full surrender. And that goes against everything that we want to do because we want to be in charge. That's the challenge. Come and be challenged. Complete and total giving, which will result in a greater good. Jesus said, deny yourself. Take up your cross. But what we need to understand, and we'll stop here today, he didn't just say that. He did it. He always led by example. We'll pick back up on this tomorrow and look at why this challenge is so important to us today in this age of utter confusion and aimless direction. This can reel things back in and give us some clarity about what the days ahead hold, but even more so, who actually holds them. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today. And Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow for Making It Simple.